training all of this internal locus of control. You're training attention. You're training being present. So, is there anything you just mentioned a lot of them, but like what else when you think about, man, we'd love to teach these mental skills to our athletes. What are the first few that come to mind are the most important, and then how do you do that other than what you just said?
I'll kick things off because we're smirking because this is like what he's talking today about with his athletes in one of our camps. But what's really interesting is that the volleyball is holistic, and we all try to think that we found the golden ticket. This is the one skill that if we have, it's going to help with everything else. And what we recognize is that part of training your mindset, your mentality is like, hey, how do you treat your body? As a huge component to it. And so not just focusing on we used to do concentration grades, right? Where people had to teach them how to focus more with all our athletes ahead of time. We used to do meditation before practices and after practice, the reflection, and actually walk them through a guided meditation. And we realized that this is all good individually, but not enough. And so then what we recognize is that, hey, let's make sure that first and foremost, we're taking care of our bodies. And so working out, eating healthy, drinking water, getting enough sleep, and that's only a small component still, right? And so the next thing that we really focus on is how do we direct our thoughts? That's really what our next biggest thing is. Just hey, you have 65,000 thoughts you're going to have this day. Whatever you're thinking about is going to bring on these feelings, right? So then pretty soon one thought will trigger these emotional feelings, good or bad, which then your feelings become the minds of thinking. And so if you're having these a negative thought and that's triggering this really negative feeling, well, now you're thinking with your feelings. And so your body's like, oh, I know this feeling. I got it. Brain turn off. And so then they're competing internally all the time. You can see it on the athletes' faces and their bodies. And so giving the tools to control their thoughts and reframe their perspectives, because everything, Reach mentioned earlier, is if you can help reframe this moment, hey, I shouldn't this pass, where there's a lot of shame and guilt in serve receive, say for a libero. And also thinking, oh man, I should have got that. Well, that thought triggers the feelings of shame and guilt. And now your body is saying, oh, I know this feeling. I got this, brain turn off. And so how can you perform with shame and guilt going through your whole body, right? You have all those peptides, you produce all these chemicals and you're feeling that. And then now you're in this internal battle and how can you be present? And so kind of walking through that pipeline of let's take care of our bodies, let's take care of our thoughts. But when you do have competing thoughts or negative, there's use these tools to help reframe it and reframe your perspective. Because if you have this perspective hey, I'm not a bad person because I messed that. I just misread it. Let's refocus on what I can do. And then you start talking about identity is you're it's the whole example we give with that one study with the superheroes where they had all those fifth graders that were trying to solve an impossible puzzle.
Yeah.
One as themselves and one as their superheroes, right? And so understanding that, hey, if you look at your identity as hey, you're a hard worker, you're not same thing with Carol Dweck and the mindset, but giving these tools to say, hey, no, this is a challenge. Go make a challenge, get after it. And once they change that perspective, they control their thoughts. And again, then they start becoming more productive. And now they're not having this interference or this, contextual interference that we mentioned earlier.
That thought of that we aren't our thoughts, even that alone to teach a young person is so powerful. So, man, I'm wishing I would have played for you guys. Yeah.
Oh, whatever.
The Olympian.
You didn't do too good on your own.
I have a question for you guys. Can you teach athletes to compete? I'm kind of radically optimistic in this arena. However, I've also, I haven't been in so many seasons where I've coached athletes from start to finish, which I recognize is way harder than showing up and talking about these things for 3 days. So how do you guys see that?
Yeah, so I've changed. Competing, I think for a lot of people is winning and losing.